So I'm averaging like 5 of these a week.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's fun. I like it. It's a good time. I get to meet.
Every 1-to-1 is
That's what I'm doing.
podcast, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so, but I kind of I keep them a little more basic for the audience, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is just to, have a basic conversation. And I love what you said. It's basically just a 1-to-1. But I have an appraiser on this time, which, we've had. So the idea behind this was, to keep it somewhat real estate related, but wanted to also bring in entrepreneurs and everything along those lines, because it's no secret that lenders, real estate agents, we're all kind of like self-employed business owners. So I talk a little bit about ways that we get new business, things that we're seeing in our industry as far as like sales stuff, all of that. So it's not just real estate and lending. There's also the entrepreneurial aspect to it. But having an appraiser on right now, I had an appraisal come in short that we got today, and the real estate agent's already ready to slit your throat because you're the reason that we can't get this deal done.
Yeah.
So as an appraiser, I mean, you sometimes get to be the bad guy, right?
Oh, we're usually the bad guy. And that, I think, comes down to, like, how many appraisers do you know?
Mm-hmm.
How many of them have you ever met? And I would say very few. The average age is about 65.
Yeah.
So
Why is that?
It's just an older field. It's not really advertised a lot unless you have bought a home or are planning on buying a home.
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't even know that appraisals happen. Well, I guess if you're refinancing as well, but if you're like a renter, you don't know that that's happening. If you don't know that this like behind the scenes thing is going on, then you don't know it's a field that you can really get into.
And then, talking about the age part of it, of course, but is it tough to enter? Is it something that like isn't fun? I mean, there's got to be more than just like not knowing that it's a job.
Yeah. So, for me, so I have my doctorate in physical therapy. So looking at that in comparison to what it took to become an appraiser, it was like, oh, I just like went to a course overnight.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest part about becoming an appraiser is finding a supervisor.
Okay.
So you have to have, I want to say it's 1,000 or 1,500. It's been a while since I've had to look at those numbers.
Okay.
Of supervised work, but you're paid during it. As someone that's in healthcare, your internship is not paid ever. You have to have a bachelor's degree if you want to appraise anything over $1 million, or an associate's in real estate, or you can just take certain classes.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just want to be licensed, so anything under $1 million, you can just.
I gotcha.
Do it.
So for my real estate agent audience here, in fact, I gotta get up. This camera's gonna drive me fucking crazy.
I see you keep looking at it. Should I be looking at the camera ever?
You can just look at whatever you want.
Okay. Okay.
We cut everything and all that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
it was just driving me crazy because that camera was crooked. And that's the toughest part of what I'm doing here. It's like I have to be this like technician while also like, hosting
doing
a podcast.
This part. Yeah.
So for my real estate agents out there, there's always this like crazy misconception about what comparables are good, what comparable homes are not good. So this is very, very top of mind for me. I literally got in this morning and I have an appraisal that is short. It's on a pretty big deal, actually. It's I want to say the purchase price is like $2.4 million. It came in at $2.1 million. And immediately the real estate agent reaches out to me and is like, oh, what is this appraiser thinking? Like no one ever complains when the home comes in value, right? I never hear anything. It's like crickets. But when the home doesn't come in, somehow the real estate or the appraiser doesn't know what he or she is doing. And the real estate agent's looking at all these other comps. And, public service announcement, by the way, to you real estate agents, if you have an appraisal that comes in low, like calling me and like telling me all of the things that are wrong with the appraisal, it doesn't do anything. I want every home to appraise. It's not my appraiser, for the record. These appraisers are typically picked at random. The best thing that you can do is put all of the things that you say to me into an email, and we'll go ahead and forward that over to the appraisal management company, and it'll get to the appraiser, and we can start the process there. The long, drawn-out conversation that I have to have on the phone with real estate agents about how dumb the appraiser is just a waste of time. So keep that in mind. But as far as the comparables are concerned, one of the things, and I'm sure I really want you to like expand very much on this. I think it's going to be great. But the first thing I really want you to start with, if you don't mind, is the very first thing he said was, this is what your appraiser averaged everything in terms of price per square foot. I already see your face. Price per square foot. And here all these other homes are selling at this price per square foot. So mathematically, like, this appraisal's garbage.
Yeah, I wrote about a 30-minute presentation on how price per square foot isn't that important.
Okay.
So a lot of agents are like, oh, it sold for this price per square foot, so I'm just going to multiply that times the square footage of my house, and boom.
Right.
That is...
So that's not how it works.
That is not how it works. Okay. We're really breaking things down. We're looking at what upgrades it has. Are there any things like, is the siding, does it have, like, has it started being eaten away by termites or something like that? Does the roof need to be replaced? How's the flooring? If every house in your subdivision has been updated, and you just look at that price per square foot and you're like, oh, I'm just going to take a couple dollars off and then multiply it, the likelihood of that meeting value goes down.
Okay.
Whereas if you're looking at, okay, sure, this house next door just sold for X value, but it's way nicer, try to find a comparable that looks about the same in the inside and the outside of your house. Because that's what I'm going to do. I can't take every nice house in the neighborhood and just compare it to this house that's not updated.
Sure.
So you might have to end up expanding just from the subdivision to find something that's actually comparable. We see that a lot in East Austin.
Okay.
They have areas where, those houses are just getting leveled and a new, like, contemporary, I call them boxes, boxes on boxes, just starts getting built. Well, the price per square foot for that subdivision has now gone up, but has your house gone up to that value? No.
Right, because it's older. It's not comparable.
It's probably going to be torn down.
Right.
So now, next door just sold, but I can't even use next door. Even though the location is there, I can't use it because it's probably brand new. This contemporary home, everything is updated, and you have something that was built in 1950 that needs to be torn down.
So when we're talking about the way that we assess value, and there's obviously many things, I mean, it's going to be year built, it's going to be square footage, it's going to be quality, it's going to be proximity to our home. What do you feel that is, if we were to label those in order, what do you think is the most important when you're thinking about what's a good comparable sale?
Yeah, so it's going to sound like I am, what is it? It's going to sound like I'm kind of going back on everything I just said. Location is the most important.
Yeah.
But sometimes we have to let go of some of location and find a comparable location. Sure. And then after that, I'm going to be looking at the quality of construction, the condition that the house is in, then it's going to be square footage, like bed, bath count, things like that. The very last thing I'm going to look at is upgrades.
Okay. What about date of sale?
Date of sale. So I typically go with the first 90 days. If I can find something in the first now to 90 days past, then great. If I can't, then I'll go up to typically 11 months. I stop there because it gets really funky when I'm turning in an appraisal that just says, like, the same month that it would expire.
Okay. Can you look past sales that are newer and go with older sales if you wanted to?
There's nuance there. So yes and no. It depends on the sale.
Okay.
So yes, if we're talking, East Austin and I have that brand new construction that just sold and you are nothing like it, then yeah, because that's just not a comparable sale. But I will have to find something that is recent, that is similar to you in more ways.
Okay.
But I can't just pass things up and ignore things to make a value.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I run into that all the time where we might have an appraisal that comes in light or low, and we have, real estate agents that are producing comparable sales, but they're older than the ones that the appraiser has used, and they're saying, well, what about these? And it's like, yeah, we see that these homes sold and they are comparable. However, there are homes that have sold more recently for less. And unfortunately, we can't look past those. We have to, we want to try to use real time sales as close to our, as close to the appraisal date as possible. But sometimes we have instances where people want to, like you said, look past that. And it's like, well, we can't really do that. What are you seeing as far as, and I'm sure there's a number of reasons, but what seems to be the main reason that right now, if you do have a home that doesn't appraise, that it is not appraising? Is it because it just was priced inappropriately? Or is there a misconception, like you put it, as in regards to like upgrades? Like, what seems to be the reason a home isn't appraising in today's market?
So I actually haven't come across many that are not appraising right now because the market's been stable for a little while.
Okay.
People are really getting their footing. But I was seeing that in the beginning part of the year because prices were being set based on older sales.
Okay.
Whereas now, even if you look back about 6 months, you're still kind of hitting it. So if that's how you price, then and you price by looking back 6 months, then great, we've been stable for 6 months. But in February, if you price by looking back 6 months, then there's a strong chance you were overpricing.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would agree with that. I haven't seen too many things come in short. I mean, I have this one today, but I haven't had anything come in light in probably a few months. And yeah, in the beginning of the year, that's what we saw. And then I was really nervous. To be quite honest, I was very nervous when we started to see the market turn that we were going to have a bigger problem because, I put on this whole thing in the beginning of the year where I was like literally like chanting like protect the equity, because you're seeing builders do it, right? Like builders are intentionally providing all of these, seller incentives that they call them. And it looks really sexy and it looks like they're doing favors. But in reality, we all know that the main reason they're doing it is because lowering the purchase price for them, it's going to hurt the appraised value of all of the other homes that they haven't even built yet. So it's in their best interest to, stuff all these seller incentives in there, because now the records show that the home sold for more, when in reality, like, what they're netting might be the same amount as if they came out of pocket $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. And I was really nervous with real estate agents because I've been in this market long enough to know that like we need to keep an eye on the market as far as equity is concerned, especially agents that are like farming neighborhoods and things like that. Because if you're selling homes and, if you're listing at say 500,000 and someone comes in and says, hey, I want to buy this home for 490,000 and you just let it go at that number, now you have a $490,000 comparable sale, opposed to saying, hey, we'll go ahead and give you $10,000 worth of seller concessions. We're still going to sell this at 500K. And then that way everybody kind of wins, and it helps the market as a whole, because now we don't have a $490,000 comparable sale in the neighborhood. We stay at 500K. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, I think it's a combination of, real estate agents just want to get paid. And I think some of it is just lack of education and understanding how it can hurt us as an industry in the long run by just giving up purchase price and not giving those seller concessions. And we hit a little bit of a bump in the road in February and March. And truthfully, I thought it was going to be worse. Here, every deal that we were making offers on with my clients, I was telling the real estate agent, hey, like, let's get the seller concessions going. And it's tough for me to kind of explain that, because it kind of looks like I want the seller concessions just to like eat into the closing costs. But, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with having your closing costs paid too. That's a great incentive. But it really was designed to continue to protect the equity in the neighborhood. And I was really nervous it was going to be a lot worse. So I'm happy to hear that, you're not seeing as much, that we've kind of stabilized and all of those things. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my next question for you with the appraisals and the things that you're seeing. Do you feel like, for those out there that are waiting for property values to come down, from what I'm hearing from you, that's not happening?
It's really hard to say,
Mm-hmm.
because, if I'm predicting the future from a year ago and then that using that trend, then sure. But if I'm predicting it from the last 6 months, every report that I'm running for, different neighborhoods, different MLS areas, it is pretty stable for the last 6 months. Now, we typically do see that dip October, November, December, and that's just seasonal. So it might go down a little bit from then, but what I am seeing is seller concessions going crazy.
Yeah.
Which you mentioned, keeping the equity and everything, and it's interesting hearing it from that point of view because I adjust for concessions.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have you're selling the house and I'm using that $500,000 house with the 10K concessions, that's the first adjustment that I'm doing. So on my grid, that property instantly goes down to 49.
Interesting. Okay.
But now that's when I'm using it as a comparable.
Mm-hmm.
So I have some that I've been having to do like $45,000 concessions.
No, it's crazy.
Which is insane.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I'm. It's not even a point of view; it's a fact. That's why these builders do it. I mean, it's a strategy on their end because they can really, burn themselves out of a lot of money if they are just, reducing the purchase price over doing the incentives. And so, yeah, public service announcement out there, guys. The builders are not giving these incentives to like take care of you. It's very self-serving, and it's all good. Business is a business. Profit's not a dirty word. But yeah, I mean, I run into situations even with my potential buyers where they're like, "Hey, we're going to go with the new build. They're offering us all these incentives." And listen, I get it, but let's keep it real here. Like these builders are not your friends. They're not like trying to hook you up.
Yeah.
I know that you said that you're doing a lot of new build stuff. What does that look like in comparison to doing like existing? Are those appraisals different? Are they, is an appraisal no matter what? What does that look like?
An appraisal is an appraisal. Complexity changes,
Mm-hmm.
but that changes whether it's, a multi-million-dollar new construction versus like a couple $100,000 new construction. That would be different regardless if it was new build or not.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's an appraisal.
Gotcha. So as far as like your job is concerned in terms of day to day, do you ever have to make any kind of contact or connection with, the real estate agents or even the clients? And if so, what does that look like?
Yes. So I do have to make contact with the agent. Now, my client is the lender.
Mm-hmm.
It is not the agent. It is not the buyer, even though the buyer is typically paying for the appraisal.
Right.
I don't talk to them at all. I don't talk to the buyers. I don't talk to the sellers. The only agent that I typically talk to is the listing agent, and it's just to be like, hey, I'm planning on coming at this time. Does that work for you? Talking to my client, which again is the lender, typically there's not like a lot of communication. They're just like, do it.
Right.
Do the appraisal. Yeah.
Gotcha. And so when you do connect, with these real estate agents on the listing side, I mean, what are your experiences when you deal with these agents? Like, what is that like? Are they friendly to you? Are they just kind of like whatever?
It depends.
Uh-huh.
Women are super friendly. They're exclamation point, smiley face, let me know if you need anything. The guys are just kind of like, do whatever. It really doesn't change anything for me. I haven't come across any agents that have just been outright rude.
Okay.
I do find that some agents like to leave packets, which is great. I've done a lot of research on the property prior to going and inspecting. Some appraisers are a little bit different. They don't do any research on the property and like the comparables in the subdivision before going on the inspection. So it could be really helpful for them. Yeah,
well, there's two things that you just said that I really want to unpack. So the first one is, I deal with agents and they talk about how they put together what you call like a packet. They've got their comparable sales, they've got all of that. And I'm sure this is a, case by case. Every appraiser is probably different, but why don't you tell everyone, what does that look like? Do you find that offensive? Do you find that a waste of time? Do you find that to be helpful? Like, what is the appraisal, or we'll call it like the packet that the listing agent puts together for you? How does that feel? What does that look like for you?
I mean, I don't get offended by it at all. There's no ego involved. We're all trying to just do our job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the packet usually has the MLS listing,
Okay.
which you can just save it. It's kind of a waste of ink. You don't have to print the MLS listing. I already have the MLS. I
Mm-hmm.
have to know that information in order to accept the assignment because I have to know the scope of work. I typically do not look at comparables that are given to me until I'm later down the line. If I'm like, okay, where the
Yeah.
heck did they get this from? Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to be biased. This is an unbiased opinion.
Sure.
I get paid no matter what. So that's great. Whereas the agent is only getting paid if this thing sells.
Right.
So me looking at what they're giving, they're already a biased party.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some times where I'm like, what do they see that I am not seeing?
Mm-hmm.
And then I look and I'm like, oh, okay, this actually makes sense. I don't know how I missed that.
Okay.
And there are some times where like I just look at the packet for fun. I already know I'm good with the appraisal. And I'm like, you could tell that they just wanted this sale to happen.
Right, right. So, so all things considered,
Mm-hmm.
real estate agents out there putting together a packet could be helpful, right?
In email.
In an email.
Yes. That's for me. Now, for some of like our more seasoned appraisers, they might prefer paper. I'm
Mm-hmm.
fully digital. So is my business partner. We only do digital.
Okay.
So there are times where I'm like, I put that packet in my car somewhere.
Gotcha.
Whereas having it in an email, that's just so easy for me. Copy, paste,
And they
look
have your
back.
email because you reached out to them to get the inspection?
That's typically through text. I find that agents have the easiest time if I just text them, which I'd love to know if there's a better way. I know some agents only do showtime, so then there is no communication.
Okay.
But yeah.
And so how do I get your email address if I'm a real estate agent?
Well, if I have messaged you, because you're not using just showtime,
Uh-huh.
I've messaged you to be like, hey, I'm coming at this time, or, is this time available? If you're wanting to send me a packet, just be like, hey, I have a packet. What's your email? And I've had quite a few real estate agents do that. And
Okay.
I prefer a packet that way, but others might not.
There it is. I think that's great advice, right? So, like, this is why I was excited to have you on, because I know there's a ton of real estate agents out there that would love to know that, kind of that preferred method. So, you're connecting with me probably via text, letting me know that you're going to be at the property. I should probably request your email and then go ahead and forward over any kind of information that I think may be helpful to you. And then I guess my next question is do you ever have real estate agents that like want to meet you at the house, or are you normally just there on your own? What does that look like?
I've had a couple that want to meet me at the house.
Okay. Is that ever helpful?
No.
There it is.
It is never
Not helpful, real estate agents. There is no need for you to be there. Go ahead and get your comparable sales. Send them via email. But I like that because I'll be quite honest. I talk to, tons and tons of real estate agents, and I do not think that that is something that a lot of them know. And I'm sure there's some of you out there right now that are like, I do it all the time. Good for you. I would say the vast majority are not doing that. Would you agree? I mean, if you did 10 appraisals, how many of them are going to email you, some information?
One.
Right. So maybe 10 to 20% is doing it. 80% of you are not. Might be good for you, might help you out. And then the other thing that you said when you were giving kind of an explanation that I want to unpack, and this one is for my buyers because I get this all the time. In fact, now that I think about it, it happened on this other situation. The real estate agent met the appraiser at the property. So you mentioned that the majority of the research that you are doing on the house is done before you even get there.
Typically.
Right. Because one of the things that I run into a lot almost every time, right? Because even if the real estate agent's not there, there's like a Ring camera or something along those lines. Um, as soon as the value doesn't come in, the phone call I get, it's like, I swear it should just be recorded because it's the same every time. And within the first 10 seconds, the real estate agent says she was there for like 10 minutes and then she left.
Yeah.
How could anybody be able to appraise a property when they're only there for 10 minutes? It's total bullshit, right? That's basically what I get. So
Yeah.
public service announcement to all of my buyers, my borrowers that are refinancing, and real estate agents out there. Sounds like 90% of the research is basically done before you even get there. You know the square footage, you know the year built. You're ultimately there to do what?
So I'm there to do measurements.
Mm-hmm.
Most of that happens on the outside. So if you're looking on a Ring camera, you probably only see me like walk past it real quick and then go around the back. Usually people don't have Ring cameras on their back door. So most of the measurement is on the outside. If it's a 2-story, I do internal, like inside measurements, interior measurements. And then once I'm inside, I'm labeling where all of the rooms are and taking pictures of all of the rooms.
Okay.
I'm looking at it like a typical buyer. How long does it take for a typical buyer to walk in a home and be like, all
That's a
right,
good point.
I see all this.
Right.
I'm not an inspector. A lot of people get that confused with a home inspector. Yeah. They're there for like 3 hours, and it is never good for us to overlap. I actually had it is never good. Don't let us and the inspector overlap. I did one, and I was like, okay, yeah, like this is pretty good. And the inspector pointed everything bad out. And I'm like, these are things that I don't even typically look for.
Right.
Because the average person wouldn't see this.
Yeah.
But now that they're being pointed out, well.
There's another nugget for you real estate agents out there. Don't let the inspector be there when the appraiser's there.
Yeah. It's best. I don't mind if people are there. It's fine. A lot of times the homeowner is there and, you know, they just want to get their things sold. So they're like, whatever. It's good. It's best if nobody is there because then I can just walk in, do my thing. It typically is going to take no more than 30 minutes for your average size home. If, you know, your multi-million-dollar, 4,000 square feet is going to take a little bit longer.
Sure. No, that makes sense. You know, to keep this in the entrepreneurial spirit, move a little bit away from real estate, one of the things that I always ask is, you know, you're basically running a business, right? So what are the things that you're currently doing now to pretty much get new business, right? Like, what are the marketing things that you're doing? What are run with that.
So for an appraiser, most of our stuff is through lenders. So we have to go through an AMC. So we're signed up for like 80.
What is AMC for the folks out there that don't know?
An AMC is an appraisal management company. So they're like the middleman between the lender and us.
Gotcha.
And that's so the lender can't really bully us anymore. So
I miss those days.
Right. Yeah. Luckily I didn't get to see those days.
Yeah.
So we're signed up for the AMCs, and then that's how the lender can get with us.
Okay.
I do networking with real estate agents because we offer real estate agent specific appraisals because you can get a pre-listing or a offer appraisal.
Yeah, let's unpack that. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so especially when the market's changing or you're like, I can't pass up this, but I do not know this subdivision or I'm not familiar with this, but like I can't afford to not have this sale. You can get that seller, and I've also had it where the seller is just, my house is worth this.
Millions and millions of dollars.
Millions, and it is not worth millions. Yeah.
Right.
$300 billion.
Right.
So we offer those because then you have that documentation of like, okay, based on everything, this is what it is. Then that's security for when the appraisal comes in, and hopefully less than 90 days from then, you're like, wait. All of these other sales support, and you didn't use any of them, but we're still within that time bracket. Like, what's going on, or there hasn't been that many more recent sales. So you can use that to help you, I don't want to say fight, but renegotiate.
Sure. So like to run it back to, if I'm a real estate agent
Yeah.
and I have I have a seller who wants to sell his or her home, and they're basically telling me, hey, we think our house is worth $1 million.
Yeah.
And I'm a real estate agent and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I can't see this thing selling for more than 900. It might be good just to avoid a lot of time wasting and heartbreak to have you come in and say, hey, if I were to appraise this property today, here's what I think that it would come in at. So as far as like you mentioned in terms of renegotiating, me as a real estate agent could say, all right, Mr. Seller, here it is. Here's what an actual licensed appraiser thinks this property is worth. I know you want to get $1 million for it, but it's just not realistic. You're going to have to find somebody who's going to basically buy your house for more than what the market is going to bear.
Correct.
And me as a real estate agent, that's a great strategy because now I might actually not only get the listing, but I might get the listing at a price that it's actually going to sell, which is what everybody really wants, because at the end of the day, we want to sell the home and all get paid and go home. So keep that in mind to reach out to Gabrielle, real estate agents, for things like that. I think that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And, time is money. And I think it's a great way to save a ton of time. And then the other way that you're doing these pre-listings is in the event, just so I understand it, is if I'm a real estate agent and I work in a specific market, but here there's a home that is in a market that I'm not super familiar with. So instead of doing all this insane research or contacting maybe some of my other colleagues, I can have you come out and really just give me an idea of what the house would realistically sell for so that I can list this and not look like I don't know what the heck I'm doing because I'm operating in a market that I don't traditionally operate in.
Exactly.
Boom. Got it.
Yeah. We also do for pre-offer. So one, if you get that appraisal and you're like, it's going to come in at 900 and someone's like 8,500 or, 850,000
Yeah.
things, 850,000. And you're like, no, like absolutely not. Or if you're on the buyer side and you're like, man, my buyer really wants this house and they really want to offer 20,000 over, but I know that it has to appraise that. So you can get that appraisal to be like, okay, is it going to appraise?
Right.
And, did they just list low? So I've had that where, I've had one where they were doing cash, so you wouldn't even need an appraisal, and they wanted to do an appraisal to negotiate during the option period because the owner was saying that the house was X square footage, and the agent was like, no, it's not. It's definitely not. It's not worth this. But the seller was like not really wanting to negotiate. So during the option period, they went and got an appraisal, and then they were able to negotiate better of like, no, this is what it's worth. This is how big the house actually is. Now let's talk.
No, that makes sense. And so outside of the things that we've talked about as far as going, getting in touch with because I don't think a lot of real estate agents are aware that that's even an option, right? So we're trying to stay on the new business topic here. So one way for you is to go after real estate agents directly for pre-listing kind of appraisals and things like that. And then you also made mention of going after appraisal management companies so that you can kind of get tied in with lenders and all that other stuff. Is there anything else outside of those two things that you're doing that are helping you generate, new business and grow?
We are going to start working on, we haven't started yet because the tax assessors haven't started coming out yet.
Okay.
But we are going to start reaching out to homeowners to help lower taxes.
Nice.
So we were able to get a 15% reduction in taxes for one of our clients. So homeowners can reach out to us directly to help fight that.
Okay. And how do they find you? Website, stuff like that, Google searches?
Countryvaluations.com. It's going to be the easiest place. We do have a Google business, but I have been slacking.
Well, and all the traffic that you're going to get from all the videos that we're going to do on this podcast, I hope will help you out, of course.
Yeah.
So I have a question that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about, but I think they're going to want to know your answer. What are your thoughts on AI taking your job?
It is terrifying.
Right.
Now, there has been systems kind of like that already in place, but AI needs to take our jobs because there's not, like, we have a couple more years until we have an extreme appraiser shortage. So a lot of banks have started their own appraisal programs. They're paying for people to become appraisers because what do? Everybody knows what 2020 and 2021 felt like when no appraisers could come out for weeks.
Right.
Appraisals were insane.
Worst.
Yeah, well, a lot of those guys are going to be retiring soon. So it's kind of like, okay, well, if we can't get people into the field, then we have to go AI. The thing with AI is, unless you still have someone going into the house, because some agents are amazing at taking pictures.
Yeah.
Some are just like, this house is going to sell itself.
Right. They're using their camera phone.
Yeah, you're doing whatever, you know.
Seen it.
And in those situations, well, your house might not, like the house that you're selling might not look that great if I'm only looking for everything online. So with AI, I think people are still going to have to go into the homes to do a full sketch, the print of the house. A lot of houses have like a carved in patio. So if you look at just the roof, then that looks like it's part of the square footage and it's not. So I think there's a little way to go, but it is definitely a fear.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting too because I hear what you're saying as far as someone physically going in, and in addition to like photos, like what about fraud, right? Like people don't think about this, but I've literally seen it firsthand. I've been doing this long enough to where we've seen situations where the photos that are a part of the listing are not real. And you're doing these almost like a shell of a house, gutted kitchens, all this crazy stuff that I've seen that aren't in the photos. And so I agree with you. I don't see how, at least in the near future, AI could, get rid of someone physically going into the property. But what I think is interesting is hypothetically, I'm just role playing here. If AI gets to the point where you're inputting the information, right? Or some of it, because some of it's already available, right? And it can just be accessed online by AI. And really, the only information you're putting in is like the quality, maybe some of the upgrades and everything. And here, this artificial intelligence kind of goes in and creates this algorithm and spits out a value. Who are the real estate agents going to get to be mad at now?
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Google?
I don't know. I mean, that's the question, right? Like, am I gonna get phone calls about how stupid AI is and it doesn't understand? And if so, like, what are we gonna do about it?
Yeah.
Are we gonna call and yell at the AI?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Who knows?
To me, it's kind of, to be quite honest, it's almost kind of exciting a little bit because there is a part of me with the appraisal process that, like, at the end of the day, it is very, very unusual, or not unusual, but it's very rare that we have an appraisal that doesn't come in with value and we somehow get the appraiser to like change his or her mind. It doesn't happen very often. The only time it ever happens is if I can point out like a full blown like mistake, and not mistake like in terms of, like the value's wrong. A mistake like, hey, you listed this at X square footage and here's what we have as the square footage, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, you're right, there's 150 more square feet. I never really see values get overturned, and I think that there is hope when there's a human involved. But like, what kind of hope are we really going to have when it legitimately is like a super smart computer AI doing this? And the reason that I'm kind of excited about it is because when we run into these appraisal issues, it gums everything up on my end as far as the lending is concerned. And 9 times out of 10, we just spend 3 to 5 days messing around, kicking and stomping and crossing our arms figuratively, and nothing gets done. And then we just have to renegotiate the deal anyway. And I feel like if artificial intelligence was more predominant in the appraisal process, all of that would just be easier to be like, the value came in low. Like, go back to your buyers and sellers and like figure it out. Because like there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, I would argue that if AI was more involved in the list price and the offer, then we wouldn't have to worry about what the appraisal comes in at.
I didn't even think of that. That's a great point.
Because that's really step one.
Sure.
So there's mess ups happening along the way, and it's just the appraiser to the lender. And the appraiser gets, berated every time. But it's like, okay, well, did your list price make sense?
Yeah.
Did your buyer put in an offer that makes sense?
Right.
Was there anything actually market supported? Or was it like, oh, but the seller thought his house was this, and, I want to make them happy. I want to make this sale, and, this person would buy it. Market value is what a typical buyer would pay for it.
Sure.
So there's that, and we are considering that. But if you're throwing the ball out of left field and expecting the appraisal to get there, is it really the appraisal's fault?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting too. I never even thought about that, and now you've got me thinking about AI on the real estate side, where as a listing agent, I wonder if they're going to eventually come out with programs, right, that will allow a listing agent to put in an address, kind of add some of the things in regards to like quality of the home and everything along those lines, and then basically just say, hey, here's what we need to list at. And instead of the buyer going, well, that's ridiculous, like I think this or I think that, it's like, no, dude, like this is the system. Like, here it is.
Yeah.
And it might make listing agents' jobs a little easier as well, because now you're taking the human emotion out of it, the human error, and being like, oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about. It's like, you're right. It doesn't matter what I know. Like, this is it. God, that's terrifying.
That's terrifying. But also you have to think, is it the human aspect that gives the market waves?
Yeah.
Whereas, like, if AI completely takes over, do we just end up with a fully stable market? Or, like, all the time?
Well,
like,
it's kind of like the point. I mean, that's a great question, I think. But the point that you made is like a house is really worth what someone will pay for it, right? And so the appraisal is just based on what a home is worth at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so hypothetically, if I'm like, yeah, well, here's what it's appraising for, but I'm confident that it's going to appreciate, or I just absolutely adore the place and can't live without it. I mean, we saw in 2020 and 2021, people were paying over what the homes were appraising for. So no, I don't think that it would put us in a completely stable market, only because you're going to have people at times that are always going to be willing to overpay for a property with the intentions that it's going to be worth that one day.
Yeah, I can see that. And, you mentioned an algorithm or, software that you can just put in the address. Well, we offer appraiser-assisted CMAs specifically for that. So
there it is.
I am the algorithm.
I love it.
I am that software.
So what do you think keeps, real estate agents from utilizing you more? Is it just they don't know? Is it that they don't want to spend the money? Is it that they maybe don't want the answer? Like, what do you think it is?
I think a couple things. One, they don't really know. If it's the money side, usually they negotiate a deal to where they're not actually paying for it. The seller is typically paying for it in the end.
Okay.
Which, $500 or a couple $100 for the seller after they make this, nice deal.
Right.
Is not that bad. But I really think it's like, how many appraisers have you talked to? And a lot of appraisers don't offer this. They only work through lenders. They don't want to deal with agents. They don't want to talk to anybody. They just kind of want to stay in their lane, do their thing, get in, get out, done.
How many appraisers do you know?
Probably about 25.
And what do you think is like a common theme amongst appraisers, if you had to say?
Are you trying to get me to shit talk appraisers?
I'm just trying to figure out. I mean, so I'll go first.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
Like, lenders typically tend to be like extroverts for the most part. I very rarely find a lender that's like super analytical and everything, although they do exist, right? Outside of that, I would say that the typical lender that I deal with is, they are, I think they're extroverted and they're salespeople.
Yeah, appraisers are not salespeople. They're not business people,
Okay.
typically. Even though a lot of them are contract, they don't. The only reason that they have an LLC is in case you sue them. But,
Got it.
like, they're not businessmen. They're typically pretty introverted, and they're very analytical.
Okay.
I'm an introvert, and I would say I'm the most extroverted appraiser that I know.
Okay.
So, yeah, they're typically not about it. They're like, I've been through the flow of the market multiple times. We're good.
Heavier male or female?
I know one female appraiser.
Okay.
Outside of me.
You know what's interesting? I actually know probably only like 6 or 7 appraisers, and like 5 of them are women. I don't know many male appraisers personally.
Yeah, no, I pretty much only know male appraisers. I know one female appraiser who's actually also a broker, and she spends a lot more of her time in the more real estate agent world. And then me. Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay, right on. Well, are there any other things that you think that your potential clients need to know? I mean, we've covered real estate agents. Reach out to Gabrielle here. I mean, she can help make your life so much easier with your sellers mainly, and then obviously buyers if they've got some, maybe fears, if you will, and even those CMAs, which stands for comparative market analysis.
Thank you. I'm like blanking over here.
The introvert. Is there anything else you want to cover?
Not really. I mean, if you have any deals or anything or new questions, just call me. A lot of times I like talking about it. I like looking things up, helping you kind of work through it. Because if I can help someone change their way of thinking and kind of get in that thought process, then ultimately when the actual appraisal comes to me from the lender, it makes my job easier.
Right.
Because then I don't have the lender sending me this email that was written that's super long about, we don't like this value or whatever. Let's just talk about it in the beginning, start adjusting how we think about appraisals, work together, and then the whole process will be smooth. And you don't have to be scared of the appraisal anymore.
I love it. See, there it is, guys, an appraiser now. I can't stress this enough. You by this time, you've definitely seen the majority of the content. This is not just real estate agents I want to have on here. I want to, keep it real estate kind of predominant, but business owners, reach out to me. Let's get some, let's chat. Let's make some content for you. And then I always wrap up all of my segments with, I'm going to ask that you look directly into the camera, give your 2-minute elevator pitch, and we'll call it a day.
A 2-minute elevator pitch.
It doesn't have to be 2 minutes, So I love this. This is for everyone. This is Dan Milstein's the owner of Gold Star, and he always talks about an elevator pitch. He says it all the time, and he didn't invent it, but I feel like he's always saying it. So envision that you're in an elevator, right? And you meet a potential client. That elevator is going up, and when the doors open, that client's walking out. So you've got that amount of time to explain who you are, what you do, and why people should do business with you.
Okay, great. Like how you described what an elevator is. Perfect. Never been in one. Hi, I'm Gabrielle. I am a co-owner of Country Valuations. We do lender appraisals as well as help with fighting taxes and pre-listing and pre or post offer appraisals. So if you're unsure of the market or you're working on a house or you have a difficult seller or buyer, just get in touch with us. We can talk about what's going to work best for you.
Nailed it. All right, I appreciate having you on.
Of course. Ugh.